911, what's your emergency? There's been an accident, trainer down, the Orca. The Orca has her, we need help now. It was supposed to be a flawless show, a moment of wonder, a breathtaking dance between human and beast. But within seconds, magic turned into mayhem. What began as routine became nightmare. The crowd's cheers fell into silence, and in that silence came the scream. Something had gone horribly wrong. This is the story of Maris Ellington, a woman whose name was once whispered with reverence in marine parks around the world. Her final moments would leave a scar on the soul of marine entertainment forever. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe and share this story so can keep uncovering the truths behind the spectacles the world too often forgets. Let's dive in. Maris Ellington wasn't just a trainer, she was a dreamer. While other kids collected seashells at the beach, she collected knowledge. Every whale, every dolphin, every call, they weren't just animals to her, they were voices waiting to be heard. By 10, she could mimic orca calls with startling accuracy. By 16, she was scrubbing tanks and observing marine mammals at her local aquarium, eyes wide with purpose. She didn't just ask questions, she asked the right ones. By 24, she graduated with honors in marine biology, specializing in animal behavior. But it wasn't her degree that turned heads. It was something deeper, a connection. She could feel what the animals felt, anticipate them. Other trainers wore whistles. Maris wore intuition. Ocean World recruited her within a year of graduation. Their flagship marine park had found a rising star. She rose fast. Trainers wanted to subah her. Tourists remembered her name. But behind the performances was someone deeper, someone who wanted change. She wasn't just swimming beside the orcas, she was speaking for them. She pushed for better food, longer rest, emotional enrichment. To Maris, they weren't just animals, they were colleagues. Her philosophy was simple. They don't work for us, we work together. And the whales, they listened. They leaned into her presence. Even the most aggressive males grew calm when Maris was near. But the marine stage hides many truths. Beneath the music and the waves lies something fragile. Because no matter how much love you give, a wild heart is still a wild heart. And on that day, even Maris couldn't see it coming. Ocean World Marine Park stood not just as a theme park, but as a symbol, a monument to humanity's obsession with the ocean's power, grace, and mystery. Built along the coast, it sprawled across 60 acres of engineered beauty, massive enclosures, glass theaters, and shimmering artificial lagoons. Every year, millions poured in to witness its crowning glory, the Orca Spectacular. It was more than a show, it was emotion, awe, and danger rolled into one. Towering black and white figures soared through the air, crashing down in choreographed waves. Children gasped, adults cheered, cameras flashed. But behind the stage lights and splashes lived a hidden story, one of beauty but also of burden. Ocean World's Orca program began over 30 years ago. Back when capturing wild orcas was still allowed in many parts of the world. The early shows, crude, forceful, orcas performing on command, a display of dominance disguised as entertainment. As time passed, the choreography grew more graceful. Trainers danced with the whales. They rode dorsal fins like surfboards. They kissed their noses before crowds roared in delight. But the smiles were rehearsed, and so was the silence. Behind that polished delusion was an immense pressure on the trainers to always be perfect, and on the animals to perform through stress, instinct, and sometimes pain. Among all the orcas at Ocean World, one name loomed largest: Cairo, a towering bull weighing 11,000 RLABs, stretching 23 feet in length. He had been taken as a calf off Iceland's coast, his fate sealed before he ever learned to hunt. Now fully grown, Cairo was muscle and memory, broad fins, deep scars on his flanks from dominance battles with other males. He was both magnificent and volatile. Trainers respected him, but they were cautious. He had mood swings, unpredictable moments, times when he ignored cues, grew agitated, or patrolled the tank with quiet aggression. There had been incidents, close calls, lunges, disobedience. None led to injury, but each was carefully logged, documented, then buried within internal files. Experts had warned the park for years. Male orcas, especially those long in captivity, could develop serious behavioral issues. These were not domestic pets. They were apex predators, engineered by nature to roam and lead in the wild. They traveled up to 100 kilometers a day. They bonded with families, played, hunted, communicated in dialects passed down generations. Inside a tank, cut off from all that, frustration fermented. Dr. Elaine Satfield, a respected marine biologist and former ocean world consultant, once said it plainly. When you take a mind like that and you box it in cement, eventually it will try to break free. You're not just putting it in a tank. Dr. Satfield had once said, you're putting its mind in a box and sometimes it breaks. Despite the warnings, Cairo remained the star. He drew in crowds, he hit his marks, and most importantly, he trusted Maris, or at least they had. But in the weeks before that tragic day, something shifted. Cairo became distant, drifting at the surface with no spark in his movements. He started jaw-popping frequently, a classic signal of agitation and dominance. The signs were there, subtle, easy to miss but real, and on the morning of February 17th, the water was calm, deceptively calm. No one knew that beneath that surface, something was boiling. It was a bright, buzzing morning at Ocean World Marine Park. Crowds poured into the amphitheater for the midday Orca spectacular. Children held cotton candy. Parents searched for seats. Excitement filled the air. Backstage, Maris Ellington moved through muscle memory. Checklist, headset, glance at Cairo through the thick glass. He was circling slow, measured, distant. At 11:46 a.m., she walked onto the platform, wetsuit zipped, hair tied tight, her voice steady. Through the mic, the crowd roared. Cairo breached in a perfect arc, soaking the front row in cheers. Everything looked perfect, but something was off. Cairo hesitated on two cues. He delayed sliding onto the platform. His tail slaps hit harder, echoing across the pool like thunder. The other trainers noticed. Maris noticed. Still, she pressed on, her signals calm, her hands steady, her voice soft. Her trust had been built over a decade, a bond no one else had. It made her confident, maybe too confident. At 11:58 a.m., they reached a familiar part of the show, a close-contact maneuver. Maris standing on a submerged platform, face-to-face with Cairo. She extended her arm, a signal for a gentle side swim. According to a witness in Section B, she was giving the signal, and then it changed. Cairo dipped beneath the surface, then resurfaced, but not where he was supposed to. And without warning, he lunged. His jaws closed around her arm with violent force. He yanked her into the water. The crowd gasped. Some screamed, some clapped, thinking it was part of the act. But it wasn't. It wasn't part of the show. Underwater, a nightmare began. Cairo thrashed, dived, spun. Maris was still in his grip. Emergency signals were deployed. Tone generators buzzed beneath the surface, designed to distract under direct. Cairo ignored them all. Seconds turned into a minute. A minute became 2. Trainers scrambled. Some raced to close the emergency gates. Others tossed in its floating barriers, anything to isolate him. But Cairo wasn't letting go, not yet. They tried to corner him, but Cairo evaded every attempt. He surfaced only briefly, just long enough to take a breath before diving again, Maris still locked in his grasp. One trainer rushed to the medical pool, calling Cairo with sharp whistles and shaking a bucket offish. He didn't respond. He didn't even look. At 12:03 p.m., the emergency dive team arrived. But protocol was clear. Noon enters while the Orca is aggressive. So they stood and watched and waited. The water churned, then calmed. Stillness returned. But it wasn't peace. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm. At 12:08 p.m., Cairo let go. Staff rushed in. Maris's body was pulled from the water, limp, unmoving. Paramedics began CPR at the edge of the pool. Visitors were ushered out in stunned silence. Some children cried. Some parents simply stared, frozen in disbelief. At 12:23 p.m., she was pronounced dead. In less than 7 minutes, a decade of trust, a celebrated life, a legacy, was over. Why did Cairo snap? Was it stress? Was it instinct? Or something darker? Something we still don't fully understand. In the hours that followed, Ocean World shut down. Every show cancelled. The amphitheater sealed. The same stage that once echoed with laughter now stood behind caution tape. We are deeply saddened to confirm the passing of Maris Ellington, one of our most experienced and beloved trainers. Our thoughts are with her family, friends, and the Ocean World team. No questions were answered, no interviews were given. The silence only grew louder. OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, launched an immediate investigation. Federal wildlife officials were contacted. Veterinarians began observing Cairo's behavior day and night. Footage was reviewed frame by frame, every second of the performance, every hesitation, every delay, every tail slap. Internal incident reports were examined, and suddenly they weren't so harmless. Old warnings ignored. Notes, close calls hidden from public view. The autopsy came back within 48 hours. The findings were brutal. Maris Ellington had sustained massive trauma, fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, hemorrhaging in the lungs, internal damage too extensive to list in full. The final cause of death was drowning, but the examiner added one chilling note. Even without the drowning, the internal injuries might have been fatal on their own. The press got hold of the report within days, and when they did, the nation exploded. Footage replayed non-stop. Maris smiling, waving to the crowd, children clapping seconds before everything changed. News outlets debated ethics, experts clashed on live television, and former trainers began to speak. One voice stood out. A trainer told Express.co.uk, "We've been warning about Cairo for years. That whale was in distress, no one wanted to listen." Within days, the gates of Ocean World became the center of a storm. Protesters lined the entrance, holding signs, chanting for change. Animal rights groups demanded immediate action, release the orcas, end the shows, honor the fallen. Social media exploded. Justice for Maris, free Cairo, shut down Ocean World outside the park. Memorials began to form. Bouquets, candles, pictures of Maris taped to the gates, handwritten letters from children, trainers, strangers. Some came to mourn, others came to fight. But everyone had a question. Could this have been prevented? And if it could, why wasn't it? This wasn't just one tragedy. It was part of a bigger pattern, a wound that marine parks had tried to hide for decades. At the heart of it all was a haunting question. Should orcas be kept in captivity at all? They're not just animals. They're intelligent, social, wide-ranging predators. They remember, they grieve, they communicate in ways we barely understand. For years, marine parks said yes. The shows were safe. The whales were happy. The trainers knew what they were doing. But Maris's death, like the deaths before hers, shattered that illusion. 10 years earlier, in 2010, another tragedy had unfolded. SeaWorld trainer Dawn Brancheau was killed by a male orca named Tilikum. That incident was brutal, public, unforgettable. It led to federal investigations, a scathing documentary, and a cultural reckoning that rocked the industry. Dawn's death was a turning point, a symbol of a system stretched too far. And now, 10 years later, Maris's death reopened every scar. Marine biologists had long warned of the toll captivity takes. In the wild, orcas travel over 100 miles a day. They hunt, they play, they raise families, they sing in dialects unique to their pods. In captivity, they get concrete walls, a rigid feeding schedule, and a performance routine that ignores their complexity. A 2021 Wired article described orca tanks as pressure cookers, stress, boredom, social instability. It doesn't just lead to restlessness, it leads to self-harm, aggression, and sometimes attacks, because captivity doesn't just confine their bodies, it rewires their minds. Dr. Jen Sorensen, a marine behaviorist, put it simply: we've underestimated them. Orcas remember, they grieve, they get bored, and when they do, they sometimes lash out, not because they're monsters, but because they're sentient. The parallels between Maris and Dawn were undeniable. Both were experienced, both were trusted, both were beloved, and both were gone. Both had worked in parks with prior warnings, warnings that were documented and warnings that were ignored. What made it all harder, what complicated the picture even more, was the bond. Trainers didn't see the whales as threats. They saw them as family, as partners. Many said they accepted the risks willingly. But the world, watching from the outside, began to ask, should that risk even exist? At what point does entertainment cross the line into exploitation? After Maris's death, the conversation changed. Petitions gathered millions of signatures. Lawmakers reopened bills long buried in committee folders. Wonder turned into worry. Awe became accountability. Because when a top predator turns on the one person it trusted most, the world is forced to ask, what went wrong? As the pool sat still, its waters undisturbed, one truth rose above all. This was never just a performance gone wrong. It was a system built on fragile trust, and that trust had finally shattered. In the wake of tragedy, there are always echoes. For Ocean World, and for those who loved Maris, those echoes became impossible to ignore. Just weeks later, Ocean World made sweeping changes. All in-water performances were suspended. Trainers moved to dry stage demonstrations only. Emergency protocols were rewritten from the ground up. To some, it was long overdue. To others, it was too late. But the reform didn't stop. A new department was created, focused on orca enrichment, mental wellness, and ethical care. Former critics, biologists, and behaviorists were brought in to help rewrite the future. The Orca Spectacular, once the crown jewel of Ocean World, began to fade quietly into the background, but Maris's legacy wasn't written in policies, it lived in hearts. Her grieving family chose action over despair. 6 months after her death, they launched the Maris Ellington Foundation, its mission, to support marine mammal research, to fund advanced safety training for handlers, to advocate for ethical, irresponsible wildlife stewardship. Donations poured in. Students around the world carried her name into classrooms and laboratories. Ocean World staff held a candlelight vigil beside the main tank. Flowers floated on the surface, and beneath it, Cairo, circled, slowly, silently. To those who knew Maris, she wasn't a thrill seeker. She was a listener, a caretaker, a woman who believed that trust, true trust, even between species, was sacred. She never treated the whales like tools. One co-worker said, she spoke to them like equals. Another added, she wasn't naive. She knew the risks, but she believed in the work. She believed in the connection. For many, the pain of her death could never be separated from the beauty of her life, a life driven by passion, rooted in compassion, devoted to the creatures she loved. Her story ended in violence, but her legacy lives on. In every policy changed, every voice raised, every young scientist inspired, and every orca given just a little more space to live as nature intended. Maris Ellington's story is more than a tragedy. It's a reflection of the complicated bond between humans and the wild, of the cost of control, and of the price of pushing too far in the name of entertainment. Can we truly love a creature and still cage it? Can trust exist in a world built on control? These questions are not easy, but they are necessary. Parks are changing, policies are evolving, but Maris's story reminds us the work is not finished. If her story moved you, if it made you pause, reflect, or question, let that be the beginning. Support. Marine conservation. Educate yourself on captivity. Speak for those who cannot, because behind every show, behind every glass wall, there is a story, and sometimes that story ends in silence. Thank you for watching. If this story meant something to you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue telling the stories that matter, the ones too important to forget.